Hey guys, this is the second video on if you watched the last video, it was how to put in receptacles, and this one's going to be how to wire up just a basic light switch. We're not going to be wiring the light itself, because in this case it's just going to be a shop light in this room, and we're just going to put a junction box and wire up the regular receptacles. If you need to see that, watch the previous video on that. So we're just keeping it quick and simple on this, and I will talk briefly about regular light wiring. If it has screws on it like a regular standard light fixture, just remember your black wire is your hot or ungrounded, and it goes to the gold screw, and your neutral or grounded will go to your silver screw. Gold is hot, silver is not. That's the way I've always remembered that. And don't forget your ground will hook onto your here. I want to talk briefly about some of the tools and supplies you'll need. You also want to add a voltmeter to what you see here for troubleshooting. It'll help you out a lot, and making sure your circuit's dead. But you need your 12-2 wire. This is real Romex. Your box that you're going to be mounting the switch in this case is just a nail on for new work. You got a pack of wire nuts, the light switch cover, which is actually going to be two. We're just going to show one on camera. Various tools you need. This screwdriver here is actually pretty neat. I started to make a separate video on it. It's a combo head, Phillips and straight, and it fits these screws perfect. You can also use a regular Phillips, straight, or a square head on these. Work great. That's just a regular screwdriver for that. Needle nose pliers, side cutters, diagonal cutters, lineman pliers, and the strippers. It's not the best pair of strippers, but they work. And this is really about all the tools you're going to need. So you also need a drill and a drill bit, a spade bit, about a 1/2 inch to 3/4, depending on what size, depending on how many wires you got to run through your studs. So I'm probably going to drill some holes off camera, and we'll just get started on installing the box and wiring it. It's actually going to be a double box for this, since it's two light switches. It's not going to include the actual light wiring itself, just the wiring to and from the light switch. And you've seen in the previous video, we wired up this receptacle here. So you might want to watch that too for some more tips and tricks, especially on routing the wire through the wall here. I'll talk more in detail about that. We'll talk about it briefly. The wire has to be secured within 12 inches of exiting the box and supported every 4.5 feet from there. These studs are on 24-inch centers, so there's no need for additional staples or anything in this situation. So now let's get started on the light switch. We've got to mount the box and go from there. Alright, so this is a 250-foot spool with the 12-2 with ground Romex. And you probably think, well, my little project, I can just get by with a 50-foot roll or a 25-foot roll. Nah, most of the time, unless you're doing just a single run, you're not going to be able to. So I highly recommend getting at least a 250-foot roll. And if you're wiring a house, you'll just go ahead and get the 1,000-foot spool, because you're going to need at least 2 or 3 of these, and it's just easier to work off a spool. Okay, again, it's like in the previous video, we're not going to measure exactly where this is going to be. It's not that critical in a little shed like this, so we're just going to go with it. I'm just going to use drywall screws to anchor it to it. This is not a nail-in box as you've seen in the previous video. It does use screws to anchor it. Drywall screws are perfect for just about everything except drywall. But that's about all you need to anchor that. You see it moving like this. It's actually designed to be mounted in the drywall and stuff as well. But I may put an extra screw back there just to hold that. We'll see. But we'll hold it for right now. Now this is going to be what I call the feed wire or supply wire coming from the box, breaker box. So we got to knock out some knockouts in this in order for the wire to come through. These are pretty straightforward, or a little bit different than the ones you've seen in the receptacle video. I don't like these quite as well. They're a little harder to work with, but you gotta have at least 6 inches of wire sticking out. You can always trim it off later. We'll have to have some wire for pigtails anyway. Okay, so that's your supply wire coming in. And the way we're going to be doing this is there's going to be a receptacle feeding off this as well down here at the bottom. So it's going to be tied directly in Then there's going to be 2 light switches, one for the inside light and one for an outside light, which will be wired up later on. So we're going to pigtail be 1, 2, 3, 4 black wires pigtail here. Then there'll be 2 what I call output wires going to the lights. So now let me go ahead and run the wire from the receptacle up here. Then we can start tying stuff together. Okay, this is looking more complicated than it really is. This is going down to the receptacle. It's going to be hot all the time. This is the power coming in. This is going to the inside light. This is going to the outside light. So now let me strip all this off and we'll talk about everything else. I'm going to try to make this as less confusing as possible, but this is probably not the best example to show a basic light switch wiring on, but it's just what I'm currently working on. So, you know, all your groundings are going to go together. And since the code requires a neutral, you know, all your white wires are going to be neutrals, so they're going to be tied together. So that just leaves you with your hot wires. Now you'll be running 2 pigtails off of this to ground both screws on the switches, which you'll see here in a minute. I'm just going to try to explain what's going on. So you got your neutral coming in, your neutral going to your inside light, neutral going to the receptacle, and neutral going to the outside light. So all your neutral is going to be tied together, and all your groundings are going to be tied together. Okay, so this is your hot wire coming in. This one's going down to the receptacle, so you know these 2 are going to be hot at all times. So they're going to be going together. And these are your 2 outputs of your switch. So this is going to the bottom of the first switch, this is going to the bottom of this switch. Then we're going to pigtail off of this with 2 going to the top screws. Does that make sense? Basically the only thing that's going on here different would be the extra hot wire going down there. This would be the same as what you'd typically run into. It used to be you could run your power straight to your light fixture, then come off to your light switch, then just use one of the white wires as a hot wire. But the code requires a neutral at your box. So if you did it that way, you no longer have a neutral. So you have to do it like this and run more wire. Unless you use like a 12-3, then you can use the red wire as a traveler. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the simple part taken care of. Your ground, we know what's going to happen here. So let me get all this tied together and pigtail it, and we'll look at it here in just a second, okay? Alright, so I got all the grounds tied together. Coming out to 2 for the screws on the light switches herself. The spider coat knife is too sharp. So now we're going to strip off about an inch, a little over an inch, each one of these whites. And we're just going to tie them all together. Tie the neutral or grounded together. Okay, so now it should be looking a little less complicated. We've got all the hot wires that are ungrounded. It's going to be staying hot all the time, which includes the power coming in, power going down to the receptacle, and the 2 that's going to feed the light switches. We've got all the neutrals tied together, because all the white wires are going to be served as neutrals. This is going to the inside light, and this is going to the outside light, and you're grounding for each screw. So now we can tuck this in here, get this out of the way. We're done with the neutral. We're grounded. So now, if we take this wire away and this wire away, and one of these, you'd be left with what would be your hot wire coming in from your breaker box, your hot wire feeding your light, and your ground. Your neutral's already tied in. Now, does it make a little more sense? I know this is not the best example of explaining how to wire a switch, but okay, now we're going to take the light switch. Always wire your ground wire first, just a good habit to get into. Now, the way I always do light switches is I make sure the top screw is going to be the screw that's hot, or your power that's coming in from your breaker box. That way, if you ever have to work on it again, you know for sure that is the wire that's going to be constantly hot. or if you need to splice into something later to subfeed something off of this, you can. And this is going when the wire going out to the inside light. So that's the first switch wired. All the other wires are for the second switch and will be connected exactly the same as this. So what happens here, in case you don't know exactly how a switch works, when you flip this on, it connects both of these together so the power can flow. And when you flip it off, it breaks the connection. Otherwise, if you hook this straight to this, the light would be on all the time. So that's what's going on here. So I'm going to go and get the other one wired up, and we'll put both switches in the box. And the switch does go in a certain way. You see it says off right there, and here it says on. So you want to make sure you get that oriented right. If you get it wrong, it says no. That's not the right way of putting it in. Okay, both switches are wired. You want to kind of fold the wires like this, so when you press them in, they're just going in together and not putting a strain on anything. Now you're ready to run these screws in, and we're just going to use an impact driver to speed things up. Don't take it in all the way yet. You want to get that centered in the slot so your switch cover will line up right. And that's all there is to it. Now you're ready to put the cover on. You may need to adjust these slightly to get everything to line up right. As long as you put them right in the center, most of the time they're going to be just right. Sometimes something can move on you, don't realize it or something too. I think we got lucky in this case. And you don't want to go crazy tighten it. You just want to barely snug it because it will crack that plastic very easily. So you got to keep that in mind when you're doing this. It's not as critical if using a metal cover. They'll take a little bit more. The screw will strip out on the switch itself too. So now we're ready to hook the power up to the box. Now I still got to wire the receptacle down here and the lights, which will be done off camera because this, like I said before, this is just going to feed a receptacle to plug a shop light into. So if you need to see how to wire a receptacle, watch the previous video on that. And that's the light. You can see there, just got a standard LED shop light, 10,000 lumens. Okay, this is not the best example of a breaker box to show you how to wire it, so we'll look at another box here in a minute, but this is the box that there's two circuits tied into. I'll use this same clip on the receptacle video and the light switch video. But your hot wire ties into the breaker. This is a square D box. Your grounding, which is the bare wire, will tie into the grounding block, and the white, which is your neutral or grounded, will tie in on the neutral strip. The reason I said this is not a good example, this is a real old box. I just using this shed here, and I don't even have 220 here. It's 120 with a breaker jumper over to get both power on both buses. So this is just, you know, something just to have for lights more or less. But we'll look at another box. Most of your new boxes will have a separate buses down the side, as you'll see here in a minute. Alright, so this will be a little better example to show you, and this is going to be used in both the receptacle and the light switch video. Let's say this is the wire we just ran coming into the box. You trace the black wire. I'm just going to go straight into the breaker right here. These are 20 amp breakers. And your grounding will tie into the grounding bus on this side, and your neutral or grounded will tie in on the bus over here. You see over here. And that's how this box is wired. The other box that you seen earlier is actually fed off of this box. And anytime you do anything with the breakers, I recommend at least turning the main breaker off best to turn off your power coming in, if possible, from an outside disconnect or something. Because when this is on, your buses are hot down here, so you can't touch nothing down here. Well guys, I guess that's about it for wiring the light switches. I apologize for not being as simple as it should be for showing how to wire it, but I think once you understand what all the wires do, it's really not that complicated here. And so yeah, if you got any questions or comments about wiring up a light switch, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I am a licensed journeyman electrician, and I should be able to help you and point you in the right direction if I can. So again, thanks for watching guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.